The sun was sliding down behind the endless Wyoming hills, turning the whole sky into a quiet burning gold. Evening on the ranch was always soft, almost sacred, like the world held its breath before slipping into night. And somewhere between that golden hush and the rising breeze, Elara Hayes stood alone near the horse corral, her hands resting lightly against the old wooden fence. She was only 20, but her eyes carried the weight of someone who'd lived far more years than she'd been given. Life on the Hayes ranch had shaped her: early mornings, cold winds, dust storms, and the silent company of horses. She didn't complain, she never had. But deep inside her chest, something restless had been growing, a quiet ache for a life she had never dared to imagine. Elara pushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear as she watched the horses. Her favorite, a chestnut mare named Saffron, lifted her head and trotted closer, as if sensing Elara's mood. The mare slowed, nudging her arm gently. "Hey girl," Elara whispered, running her fingers through Saffron's warm mane. "I know. I feel it too." Behind her, the ranch house windows glowed softly. Her father was in there somewhere, tired, worn, and quieter than he used to be. The ranch had been slipping financially for months. Cattle prices dropping, endless vet bills, equipment breaking faster than they could fix it. Elara tried to help, but being only one person, she often felt like a thin thread trying to hold together a breaking rope. The world around her was beautiful, yes, but beauty didn't pay debts. She sighed and leaned her forehead against the mare's neck. "Sometimes I think," she began, but the words didn't fully form. She didn't need to say them. Saffron understood in her own way. A sharp whistle cut across the evening air. Elara straightened, turning toward the sound. A rider approached from the west trail, fast, steady, dust blooming behind the horse's hooves. The figure leaned forward slightly as if pushing against the wind, hat pulled low, shoulders broad. At first Elara squinted, trying to recognize him. Ranchers rarely showed up unannounced, especially not near dusk. As he drew closer, her heart did a strange skip. She didn't know him. Not personally, at least. But she had seen him once, weeks ago in town, leaning against a post outside the feed store. He wasn't from their ranching circle and didn't look like he belonged to the small local community either. Back then, she remembered noticing his quiet manner, the way he watched things more than he spoke. A traveler, maybe. A drifter. But there had been something steadier in his eyes, something grounded. Now he was heading straight toward her. The horse slowed when it reached the corral, dust settling around the rider's boots as he dismounted. His hat shadowed most of his face, but she caught a glimpse of dark hair, a strong jaw, and eyes too intense to ignore. He nodded politely. "Evenin'. Sorry to come by unannounced." Elara wiped her hands on her jeans, cautious. "Is something wrong?" "No, ma'am," he said, his voice low and even. "Name's Rowan Maddox. I spoke with your father earlier this week. He said he might need an extra set of hands for the season." He paused, almost unsure. "Told me to ride by and talk to you if he wasn't around." Elara blinked in surprise. Her father hadn't mentioned hiring anyone. And yet, it made sense. They were drowning in work. Maybe he tried to handle it alone and kept quiet, thinking she'd worry. Rowan shifted slightly, pulling off his hat. The last of the sunset light brushed across his face, quietly handsome, but in a rough, tired way. Someone who'd known both long roads and long hardships. Elara cleared her throat. "My father's inside. I can get him." Before she could step away, Rowan raised a hand gently. "If you're busy, I don't want to trouble you. I can wait or come back in the morning. Elara hesitated. Something about him, his calmness, the way he stood like he belonged anywhere the earth touched, made her curious. "No, it's okay. I'll get him." She turned toward the house, then glanced back at him. "You can, wait here." Rowan nodded again, grateful and quiet. As she walked toward the porch, Elara's heart beat a little faster. Not fear, no. Something else. Something she didn't have a name for. Inside, her father sat at the kitchen table, rubbing his temples. The moment she told him someone named Rowan Maddox had shown up about work, he straightened instantly, almost too quickly. "Elara, bring him in," he said, standing. "You know him?" she asked gently. Her father hesitated, the smallest crack in his expression. "Not personally. But he came recommended." "Recommended by who?" She wanted to ask, but her father had already moved toward the door. When Rowan stepped inside the warm light of their kitchen, something shifted subtly in the air. Not danger, no. More like the weight of a story silently entering the room. Her father shook Rowan's hand firmly. "You still looking for work?" "Yes, sir." "You ever worked cattle?" "Since I was old enough to walk properly," Rowan replied. Her father nodded, glancing at Elara once in a way that made her pulse jump. "Then let's talk terms." And just like that, a stranger, quiet, steady, unknowable, became part of their dinner table conversation. Elara listened in silence, watching Rowan as he spoke, watching the way her father studied him, watching something unspoken settle between all three of them. Something that felt like the beginning of a storm. Or the beginning of a heartbreak. Or the beginning of something she was not ready for, but could no longer run from. The night settled slowly over the Hayes ranch, dragging long shadows across the open land as the wind softened into a gentle whisper. Dinner was finished, the dishes washed, and the lamps turned down low. But Elara couldn't sleep. Not with her mind circling back, again and again, to the quiet stranger sitting across their wooden kitchen table. Rowan Maddox. His name echoed in her thoughts like a half-remembered song. From her bedroom window, she could see the faint glow from the small guest cabin where her father had told Rowan he could stay. They'd prepared it quickly, fresh sheets, a working oil lamp, a worn but usable quilt her mother had stitched before she passed. The cabin hadn't housed anyone in years. Now it held a mystery. Elara hugged her arms around herself as she sat on the edge of her bed. Everything about Rowan felt still. Like someone who carried storms but kept them tied down deep inside. She felt drawn to that stillness, like a moth noticing a flame and knowing it shouldn't get too close, but unable to look away. She lay back, staring at the ceiling. Why had he come here? Why now? Why their ranch? The next morning, the answer didn't become any clearer. Dawn arrived with its usual crisp bite, the kind that woke the skin before the mind. Elara stepped out of the house pulling on her gloves, her breath forming small clouds in the cool air. The horses were restless for their feed, the roosters calling out like tiny soldiers greeting the sunrise. What she didn't expect was Rowan already standing by the barn, sleeves rolled to the elbows, pitchfork in hand, working as if he belonged to the ranch his whole life. She slowed, watching him quietly. He moved with a rhythm, not rushed, not lazy. Just steady. Focused. Every motion precise. There was something strangely comforting about it. Like he was trying to fix something without drawing attention to himself. He looked up and caught her watching. Elara tensed for a moment, but Rowan only nodded politely. "Mornin'," he said, voice low and warm. She cleared her throat. "You woke up early." He planted the pitchfork in the hay. "Old habit." Elara stepped closer. The horses stirred behind her. "You don't have to start work before anyone else. Doesn't feel right to sit around when there's work waitin'. She didn't know how to respond to that. She wasn't used to strangers who didn't speak more than necessary. Most men who came around the ranch, neighbors, traders, ranch hands, talked too loud, too much, too easy. But Rowan was quiet. Quiet, and strangely thoughtful. "Your father said we'd be checkin' the south fence today," he said gently. "I was thinkin' I'd saddle up Saffron for you, if that's all right." Elara blinked. Her. Riding with him? She looked toward the house. Her father wasn't outside yet. Did he plan this? "I can saddle Saffron myself," she said quickly. Rowan half smiled, barely there, but real. "I don't doubt that. Just thought I'd save you a few minutes." His tone wasn't cocky or patronizing. Just, kind. There it was again, that strange flutter inside her chest. "Well, thank you," she said softly. "I'll go check on my father." And she walked away faster than necessary, feeling his eyes on her but not in a way that made her uncomfortable. Just aware. Too aware. By noon, the sun warmed the earth, the sky stretching wide and blue as Elara and Rowan rode out toward the south fence line. Saffron moved easily beneath her, while Rowan's horse, a dark gelding with sharp ears, took long, confident strides. The land spread endlessly around them. Golden grass. Distant mountains. Open silence. "So," Elara began, though her voice came out more hesitant than she liked. "Where were you before Wyoming?" Rowan shifted slightly in his saddle. "All over," he said after a pause. "Montana. Nevada. A bit of Colorado. Took small jobs here and there." "You move around a lot." "I do." "Any reason?" She immediately regretted the boldness. "Sorry. You don't have to answer." Rowan glanced at her, eyes steady. "It's all right. Just, life doesn't always anchor you where you expect." Elara looked down at her reins. "I understand that." "Do you?" he asked, but gently, not doubtfully. Yeah. She exhaled, watching the wind curve through the grass. Ranch life, it keeps you in one place, but that doesn't mean it gives you peace. Rowan studied her quietly for a long moment. There's something you wish you could leave behind, he asked. Yes, she whispered before she could stop herself. Rowan didn't push. Didn't pry. He simply nodded, accepting the confession without judgment. They continued riding in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like they were sharing something unsaid, something delicate and growing. When they reached the south fence, Rowan dismounted and inspected the wooden posts. Two were loose, leaning at angles that could let cattle slip through. He knelt beside them, testing the tension of the wire. "It's not broken," he murmured. "Just worn." Elara crouched beside him. "Can you fix it?" "With a little help." She handed him the tools, their fingers brushing lightly in the exchange. The touch was brief, barely a second, but enough to spark a strange warmth that spread through her arm. Rowan didn't look at her. But his jaw tightened ever so slightly. They worked together, hands moving in quiet sync. Elara held the post steady while Rowan tightened the wire, his muscles shifting under rolled sleeves. He wasn't showing off. He wasn't trying to impress. He was just, strong. Capable. Present. Something she hadn't realized she missed. As he hammered the post deeper into the ground, he finally spoke. "Your father, he seems like a good man." "He is," Elara said quickly. "Just tired." Rowan paused mid-hammer. "From the ranch?" "From life," she whispered. "It's been hard since my mother passed. And since the drought. And since the debt started piling." She bit her lip, realizing she was saying too much. "Sorry, I'm rambling." "You're not." His voice softened. "Sometimes talkin' helps more than holdin' it in." She met his gaze, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes. Something vulnerable. Something he wasn't saying. "Is that why you ride from place to place?" she asked carefully. Rowan looked away. "Sometimes," he said quietly. "Sometimes it's safer not to stop anywhere too long." Safer. For him. Or for others. Elara opened her mouth to ask, but a sudden rustle from the brush nearby made Saffron snort and pull back sharply. Rowan stood instantly, stepping in front of Elara. Protective. Immediate. Something tightened in her chest. Whatever he was running from, whatever silence lived inside him, she knew one thing for certain: Rowan Maddox was not an ordinary ranch hand. And he was not here by coincidence. Something had brought him to their land. Something he hadn't told her. Something dangerous. And yet, Elara wasn't afraid. Not of him. Not even a little. The rustling in the brush didn't last long, just a quick shift of leaves, a small scattering of pebbles, yet it changed everything in the air. Rowan stepped forward without hesitation, placing himself between Elara and the sound. His shoulders stiffened, body angled like someone who'd spent years expecting danger where others saw only wildlife. Elara's heart fluttered unexpectedly. Not from fear, but from the instinctive way he shielded her, like it was natural for him to protect a woman he barely knew. "It's probably just a coyote," she whispered, trying not to sound nervous. Rowan didn't look away from the brush. Coyotes don't usually move quiet like that. His voice was low, calm, but alert in a way that made the world feel suddenly sharper. The brush stayed still. Nothing emerging. Nothing following. Finally, Rowan stepped back, though his eyes lingered a few moments longer on the tree line before he turned toward her. "You all right?" he asked, tone softening as he looked at her fully. Elara nodded, but her pulse remained unsteady. Not from the noise, from him. Rowan Maddox was a contradiction. Quiet but intense. Private but gentle. Mysterious but somehow reassuring. As he moved to check the fence again, Elara found herself studying him. The slight tension in his jaw. The way his breath slowed intentionally, as though calming something inside. The way his eyes kept drifting toward the distant ridge as if expecting someone, or something, there. "Rowan," she said after a moment, her voice steadier than she felt. "You seemed concerned. About that sound." He paused, his hand resting on the wooden post. "Habit," he said simply. "What kind of habit?" There was a long silence. The kind filled with things unsaid. Finally, Rowan answered, but only part of the truth. "Travelin' alone teaches you to pay attention," he said. "More folks get in trouble from what they don't hear than what they do." Elara nodded slowly. It made sense. But it didn't explain the shadow that had crossed his face. The shadow that had nothing to do with coyotes. Still, she didn't push. Rowan stood and dusted off his hands. "Fence should hold now." Elara brushed her hair back. "Thanks for helping. Thanks for letting me." That simple line, gentle, sincere, sent warmth through her chest. They mounted their horses again, heading back toward the ranch. The land glowed with late afternoon light, golden and soft, casting their shadows long across the open fields. It would have been a peaceful ride, if Rowan didn't keep looking behind them. Elara finally asked, "Are you expecting someone?" Rowan hesitated. There it was again. The pause where truth lived. "No," he said quietly. "Just a habit, like I said." But Elara wasn't convinced. Something in his voice trembled, not in fear, but in memory. The wind rolled over the grass, bringing with it a faint whistle that made both horses flick their ears. Elara tried to lighten the tension. "You know, you move like a man who's expecting trouble." Rowan managed a small smile. "I've found that trouble and I cross paths more often than I'd like." "Is that why you don't stay anywhere long?" His eyes softened, pain flickering behind them. "Something like that," he murmured. Elara felt her heart tug. She wanted to ask more. She wanted to understand him. Why he carried a heaviness in his shoulders, why his eyes seemed older than his age, why he looked at distant horizons like they whispered his past back to him. But Rowan didn't look like a man ready to talk. So she didn't push. For now. They arrived at the ranch just as the sun dipped low. Elara's father, Wade Hayes, was already outside stacking firewood. He waved them over. "You two fix the fence?" "Yes, sir," Rowan replied. Wade nodded approvingly. "Good work. Elara ain't had someone keep pace with her on ranch tasks in a long time." Elara rolled her eyes playfully. "I work fast, Pa." "That's not his fault." Wade chuckled. "Well, Rowan here works fast too. Maybe this place is teachin' him something. Rowan didn't smile widely, but the corners of his mouth lifted, just enough. "Happy to help," he said. Wade studied him carefully. "You look like a man who's had to learn a lot the hard way." Rowan's expression didn't change, but Elara saw the tightening of his fingers on the reins. "Ain't we all?" Rowan said softly. Wade nodded, satisfied, and turned back toward the pile of firewood. "Dinner'll be ready soon. Rowan, you're welcome at the table." Rowan looked surprised, actually surprised. As if kindness was something he wasn't used to. "I'd appreciate that," he said quietly. Elara watched him, feeling something ache deep in her chest. Not pity. Not curiosity. Something else. Something warm. Something pulling. Inside, the kitchen smelled like cornbread, stew, and smoke from the wood stove. Rowan sat stiffly at the table at first, his back straight, hands folded neatly in front of him, like he wasn't sure if he belonged there. Elara placed a bowl in front of him. "You don't have to sit so formal." Rowan blinked. "Old habits." "From where?" she asked gently. He hesitated again, but this time, Elara softened her voice. "You don't have to tell me everything. Just, maybe something." Rowan looked at her then, really looked. His eyes were tired, hurting, and full of something unspoken. Finally, he exhaled. "I wasn't always a ranch hand." Elara's breath caught. She knew it. She felt it. "What were you?" she whispered. Rowan held her gaze for a long, fragile moment. Then, a man trying to be someone better than who he used to be. Her heart tightened painfully. "Rowan," he looked down at his hands. "I've made choices," he said slowly. "Not all good. Not all wise. But I'm trying to walk a different path now." Elara didn't move. Didn't speak. She just watched him, carefully, softly, afraid that if she pushed too hard, he'd retreat again. "I don't care about your past," she whispered. "Not unless you want me to." Rowan inhaled sharply, like the words hit deeper than she intended. "And why's that?" he asked quietly. Elara swallowed. Because she liked him. Because she wanted to understand him. Because something inside her recognized something inside him. "Instead," she said, "because I think you're a good man, Rowan Maddox." He closed his eyes for a second, as if those words hurt in a way that wasn't pain, but something far more vulnerable. When he opened them, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I hope you're right." And in that moment, Elara knew, whatever Rowan was running from, whatever darkness lived in his past, it was closing in. And he wouldn't be able to outrun it forever. Not even on their quiet little ranch. Dinner settled into a quiet rhythm after that, spoons tapping against bowls, fire crackling in the stove, the comforting hum of a home Rowan wasn't used to. Elara watched him from across the table, noticing the small ways he seemed unfamiliar with simple domestic peace. He ate slowly, almost cautiously, as if savoring something he hadn't tasted in years. Safety. Warmth. Belonging. Every now and then, he glanced at the doorway, the windows, the shadows, like someone who'd spent too long not trusting walls to protect him. Wade leaned back in his chair, studying Rowan openly. "You ride well," he said. "And you work even better." Rowan dipped his head slightly. "Do what I can." "You look like a man who knows more than ranch work," Wade added. Elara's breath hitched, she wished her father wouldn't pry. Rowan's shoulders stiffened for a heartbeat. "Pa," she warned gently.